Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev, where today we finally continue working on our planetary defense game with a twist. Now, in case you missed it, there's a storied reason for the delay between episodes. One I highly recommend checking out to get caught up, because the differences between episode 1 and episode 2 are vast. It's also where we'll be picking up from to begin this brand new journey, and it all starts with today's plan. We'll be taking baby steps into this large new world with some visual changes to our units. We'll also start work on a firing system for our units, and to cap things off, we'll add a basic hurt and heal system for our units. Nothing we haven't attempted before, but this time there's an extra dimension involved. So let's not waste any more time and get to the coding. First, I wanted to add some Doom-like angling to our billboard sprites. This would require some new variations of our current sprite and a few tweaks to the existing code, just so those crazy creepy faces weren't always staring at us like some crazy creepy creepos. Anyway, using established math to determine the positions relative to the planet, I tried configuring the proper angle required to display the corresponding image index for each unit. In other words, figuring out the math so that the proper quote-unquote direction was displayed for each unit based on their position relative to the planet and the player. And because this was math related, you know I ended up wasting a ton of time trying to produce the right formula, which almost worked. It was close enough, so instead of spending another 30 minutes trying to get the angles working, I decided to move on. I should also mention that visually the game may look worse due to a lack of fog that was presented in the 1.5 preview. Also, please don't judge the terrible texture work. Again, a lot of this needs to be improved on in the future, and not to mention GameMaker's handling of the UVs is a little awkward. Anyway, up next were the projectiles, which required a new sprite and object. The projectile object itself acts like any other projectile we've created in the past, moving on the X and Y axis based on the direction given. Then in the unit code, these projectiles would be spawned on a basic cooldown timer, and nothing happened. Well, to get a better idea of what was going on, similar code was applied to the player, creating a projectile based on the left click check. And still nothing happened. After some poking around, I realized projectiles were spawning, they were just invisible. This was due to the draw order and how the 3D is currently set up for this project. Anyway, our units were now able to fire projectiles as long as they existed, and the player was also able to produce projectiles with the left click. So now that our projectiles were working invisible, we could move on. In order to make the projectile object universal across the board, an owner variable was added to the projectile object. Then in the unit object, a simple collision check was made for the projectile, and if the projectile owner did not match the units, they would take damage. And in order to do this, the HP value was added to the unit data grid arrays, and a function for hurting units was created. Originally, I had this function find the corresponding unit's array data based on its ID, but then I realized each unit had its grid position recorded on spawn. This simplified the removal of HP immensely, and when a unit runs out of HP, their grid data is reset to 0, technically meaning that the space becomes vacant. And if you keep your eyes on the list of data at the top of the screen, you can see that the health values drop as the player fires projectiles at existing units. And obviously this is for testing purposes. I don't intend on the players being able to destroy their own units with projectile fire. But anyway, with hurting units now a thing, we needed to create the inverse and heal the units. A blue projectile sprite was created, and then back in the controller code, our heal function was created. The function would work very similarly to the hurt function, only instead of removing health, it would add health. Then using a switch, the hurt and heal behaviors were reflected in the collision code for units to projectiles, which might give you an idea of just how important player-to-unit interactivity will be in this project, in the future that is. But sadly, that was the end of this session. Again, this is ground we've covered before, especially when it comes to Plants vs. Zombies styles projects. However, what made this different was the whole 3-dimension thing, which I'm currently planning to use more as a visual thing. I think at its core, Plants vs. Zombies will remain a 2D game presented in a 3D fashion, if that makes any sense. I'm also not completely sold on billboard units. I might just use low poly models of some sort, but honestly right now the visuals aren't too high of a priority. And another reason this session was cut short was because this was recorded around the time of a broken update, the one that seemed to create eventual memory leaks over time or something like that. I mean, eventually it got so bad that the wait took up to like 10 seconds sometimes just to close the game and relaunch it. However, this is a great step forward even with a rickety and unstable first voyage. I'm excited to continue working on this one, especially now with some actual gameplay established, and I also can't wait to bring all this newfound knowledge to other projects that I've got lined up in the future. But all of that newness will have to wait because this brings us to the end of today's episode of Let's Dev. So remember to leave a like if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and leave your thoughts on our progress in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.